The Haunting of Hill House, Shirley Jackson, for Leonard Brown. Chapter 1. No live organism can continue for long to exist sanely under conditions of absolute reality. Even larks and katydids are supposed by some to dream. Hill House, not sane, stood by itself against its hills, holding darkness within. It had stood so for 80 years and might stand for 80 more. Within, walls continued upright, bricks met neatly, floors were firm, and doors were sensibly shut. Silence lay steadily against the wood and stone of Hill House, and whatever walked there, walked alone. Dr. John Montague was a doctor of philosophy. He had taken his degree in anthropology, feeling obscurely that in this field he might come closest to his true vocation, the analysis of supernatural manifestations. He was scrupulous about the use of his title because, his investigations being so utterly unscientific, he hoped to borrow an air of respectability, even scholarly authority, from his education. It had cost him a good deal, in money and pride, since he was not a begging man, to rent Hill House for 3 months. But he expected absolutely to be compensated for his pains by the sensation following upon the publication of his definitive work on the causes and effects of psychic disturbances in a house commonly known as haunted. He had been looking for an honestly haunted house all his life. When he heard of Hill House, he had been at first doubtful, then hopeful, then indefatigable. He was not the man to let go of Hill House once he had found it. Dr. Montague's intentions with regard to Hill House derived from the methods of the intrepid 19th century ghost hunters. He was going to go and live in Hill House and see what happened there. It was his intention at first to follow the example of the anonymous lady who went to stay at Balakin House and ran a summer-long house party for skeptics and believers, with croquet and ghost watching as the outstanding attractions. But skeptics, believers, and good croquet players are harder to come by today. Dr. Montague was forced to engage assistants. Perhaps the leisurely ways of Victorian life lent themselves more agreeably to the devices of psychic investigation, or perhaps the painstaking documentation of phenomena has largely gone out as a means of determining actuality. At any rate, Dr. Montague had not only to engage assistants but to search for them. Because he thought of himself as careful and conscientious, he spent considerable time looking for his assistants. He combed the records of the psychic societies, the back files of sensational newspapers, the reports of parapsychologists, and assembled a list of names of people who had, in one way or another, at one time or another, no matter how briefly or dubiously, been involved in abnormal events. From his list, he first eliminated the names of people who were dead. When he had then crossed off the names of those who seemed to him publicity seekers, of subnormal intelligence, or unsuitable because of a clear tendency to take the center of the stage, he had a list of perhaps a dozen names. Each of these people then received a letter from Dr. Montague extending an invitation to spend all or part of a summer at a comfortable country house, old, but perfectly equipped with plumbing, electricity, central heating, and clean mattresses. The purpose of their stay, the letter stated clearly, was to observe and explore the various unsavory stories which had been circulated about the house for most of its 80 years of existence. Dr. Montague's letters did not say openly that Hill House was haunted, because Dr. Montague was a man of science, and until he had actually experienced a psychic manifestation in Hill House, he would not trust his luck too far. Consequently, his letters had a certain ambiguous dignity calculated to catch at the imagination of a very special sort of reader. To his dozen letters, Dr. Montague had 4 replies, the other 8 or so candidates having presumably moved and left no forwarding address, or possibly having lost interest in the supernormal, or even, perhaps, never having existed at all. To the 4 who replied, Dr. Montague wrote again, naming a specific day when the house would be officially regarded as ready for occupancy, and enclosing detailed directions for reaching it. since, as he was forced to explain, information about finding the house was extremely difficult to get, particularly from the rural community which surrounded it. On the day before he was to leave for Hill House, Dr. Montague was persuaded to take into his select company a representative of a family who owned the house, and a telegram arrived from one of his candidates, backing out with a clearly manufactured excuse. Another never came or wrote, perhaps because of some pressing personal problem which had intervened. The other two came. Saku. Eleanor Vance was 32 years old when she came to Hill House. The only person in the world she genuinely hated, now that her mother was dead, was her sister. She disliked her brother-in-law and her 5-year-old niece, and she had no friends. This was owing largely to the 11 years she had spent caring for her invalid mother, which had left her with some proficiency as a nurse and an inability to face strong sunlight without blinking. She could not remember ever being truly happy in her adult life. Her years with her mother had been built up devotedly around small guilts and small reproaches, constant weariness, and unending despair. Without ever wanting to become reserved and shy, she had spent so long alone with no one to love that it was difficult for her to talk, even casually, to another person without self-consciousness and an awkward inability to find words. Her name had turned up on Dr. Montague's list because one day, when she was 12 years old and her sister was 18, and their father had been dead for not quite a month, showers of stones had fallen on their house, without any warning or any indication of purpose or reason, dropping from the ceilings, rolling loudly down the walls, breaking windows and pattering maddeningly on the roof. The stones continued intermittently for 3 days, during which time Eleanor and her sister were less unnerved by the stones than by the neighbors and sightseers who gathered daily outside the front door, and by their mother's blind, hysterical insistence that all of this was due to malicious, backbiting people on the block who had had it in for her ever since she came. After 3 days, Eleanor and her sister were removed to the house of a friend, and the stones stopped falling, nor did they ever return, although Eleanor and her sister and her mother went back to living in the house, and the feud with the entire neighborhood was never ended. The story had been forgotten by everyone except the people Dr. Montague consulted. It had certainly been forgotten by Eleanor and her sister, each of whom had supposed at the time that the other was responsible. During the whole underside of her life, ever since her first memory, Eleanor had been waiting for something like Hill House, caring for her mother, lifting a cross old lady from her chair to her bed, setting out endless little trays of soup and oatmeal, steeling herself to the filthy laundry. Eleanor had held fast to the belief that someday something would happen. She had accepted the invitation to Hill House by return mail, although her brother-in-law had insisted upon calling a couple of people to make sure that this doctor fellow was not aiming to introduce Eleanor to savage rites not unconnected with matters Eleanor's sister deemed it improper for an unmarried young woman to know. Perhaps Eleanor's sister whispered in the privacy of the marital bedroom. Perhaps Dr. Montague, if that really was his name after all, perhaps this Dr. Montague used these women for some, well, experiments. You know, experiments the way they do. Eleanor's sister dwelt richly upon experiments she had heard these doctors did. Eleanor had no such ideas, or having them, was not afraid. Eleanor, in short, would have gone anywhere. Theodora, that was as much name as she used. Her sketches were signed Theo, and on her apartment door and the window of her shop and her telephone listing and her pale stationery and the bottom of the lovely photograph of her which stood on the mantel, the name was always only Theodora. Theodora was not at all like Eleanor. Duty and conscience were, for Theodora, attributes which belonged properly to Girl Scouts. Theodora's world was one of delight and soft colors. She had come onto Dr. Montague's list because, going laughing into the laboratory, bringing with her a rush of floral perfume, She had somehow been able, amused and excited over her own incredible skill, to identify correctly 18 cards out of 20, 15 cards out of 20, 19 cards out of 20, held up by an assistant, out of sight and hearing. The name of Theodora shone in the records of the laboratory, and so came inevitably to Dr. Montague's attention. Theodora had been entertained by Dr. Montague's first letter, and answered it out of curiosity. Perhaps the wakened knowledge in Theodora, which told her the names of symbols on cards held out of sight, urged her on her way toward Hill House, and yet fully intended to decline the invitation. Yet, perhaps the stirring, urgent sense again, when Dr. Montague's confirming letter arrived, Theodora had been tempted, and had somehow plunged blindly, wantonly, into a violent quarrel with the friend with whom she shared an apartment. Things were said on both sides which only time could eradicate. Theodora had deliberately and heartlessly smashed the lovely little figurine her friend had carved of her, and her friend had cruelly ripped to shreds the volume of Alfred de Musset, which had been a birthday present from Theodora, taking particular pains with the page which bore Theodora's loving, teasing inscription. These acts were of course unforgettable, and before they could laugh over them together, time would have to go by. Theodora had written that night, accepting Dr. Montague's invitation, and departed in cold silence the next day. Luke Sanderson was a liar. He was also a thief. His aunt, who was the owner of Hill House, was fond of pointing out that her nephew had the best education, the best clothes, the best taste, and the worst companions of anyone she had ever known. She would have leaped at any chance to put him safely away for a few weeks. The family lawyer was prevailed upon to persuade Dr. Montague that the house could on no account be rented to him for his purposes without the confining presence of a member of the family during his stay, and perhaps at their first meeting the doctor perceived in Luke a kind of strength, or cat-like instinct, for self-preservation, which made him almost as anxious as Mrs. Sanderson to have Luke with him in the house. At any rate, Luke was amused, his aunt grateful, and Dr. Montague more than satisfied. Mrs. Sanderson told the family lawyer that at any rate there was really nothing in the house Luke could steal. The old silver there was of some value, she told the lawyer, but it represented an almost insuperable difficulty for Luke. It required energy to steal it and transform it into money. Mrs. Sanderson did Luke an injustice. Luke was not at all likely to make off with the family silver, or Dr. Montague's watch or Theodora's bracelet. His dishonesty was largely confined to taking petty cash from his aunt's pocketbook and cheating at cards. He was also apt to sell the watches and cigarette cases given him fondly and with pretty blushes by his aunt's friends. Someday Luke would inherit Hill House, but he had never thought to find himself living in it. 3. I just don't think she should take the car is all, Eleanor's brother-in-law said stubbornly. It's half my car, Eleanor said. I helped pay for it. I just don't think she should take it is all, her brother-in-law said. He appealed to his wife. It isn't fair she should have the use of it for the whole summer, and us have to do without. Carrie drives it all the time, and I never even take it out of the garage, Eleanor said. Besides, you'll be in the mountains all summer and you can use it there. Carrie, you know you won't use the car in the mountains. But suppose poor little Linny got sick or something, and we needed a car to get her to a doctor? It's half my car, Eleanor said. I mean to take it. Suppose even Carrie got sick. Suppose we couldn't get a doctor and needed to go to a hospital. I want it. I mean to take it. I don't think so. Carrie spoke slowly, deliberately. We don't know where you're going, do we? You haven't seen fit to tell us very much about all this, have you? I don't think I can see my way clear to letting you borrow my car. It's half my car. No, Carrie said. You may not. Right, Eleanor's brother-in-law nodded. We need it, like Carrie says. Carrie smiled slightly. I'd never forgive myself, Eleanor, if I lent you the car and something happened. How do we know we can trust this doctor fellow? You're still a young woman, after all, and the car is worth a good deal of money. Well now, Carrie, I did call Homer in the credit office, and he said this fellow was in good standing at some college or other. Carrie said, still smiling. Of course, there is every reason to suppose that he is a decent man. But Eleanor does not choose to tell us where she is going or how to reach her if we want the car back. Something could happen, and we might never know. Even if Eleanor, she went on delicately, addressing her teacup, even if Eleanor is prepared to run off to the ends of the earth at the invitation of any man, there is still no reason why she should be permitted to take my car with her. It's half my car. Suppose poor little Linny got sick, up there in the mountains, with nobody around, no doctor. In any case, Eleanor, I am sure that I am doing what Mother would have thought best. Mother had confidence in me and would certainly never have approved my letting you run wild going off heaven knows where in my car. Or suppose even I got sick up there, and I am sure Mother would have agreed with me, Eleanor. Besides, Eleanor's brother-in-law said, struck by a sudden idea, how do we know she'd bring it back in good condition? There has to be a first time for everything, Eleanor told herself. She got out of the taxi very early in the morning, trembling because by now perhaps her sister and her brother-in-law might be stirring with the first faint proddings of suspicion. She took her suitcase quickly out of the taxi while the driver lifted out the cardboard carton which had been on the front seat. Eleanor overtipped him, wondering if her sister and brother-in-law were following, were perhaps even now turning into the street and telling each other, there she is, just as we thought the thief, there she is. She turned in haste to go into the huge city garage where their car was kept, glancing nervously toward the ends of the street. She crashed into a very little lady, sending packages in all directions, and saw with dismay a bag upset and break. On the sidewalk, spilling out a broken piece of cheesecake, tomato slices, a hard roll. Damn you, damn you! The little lady screamed, her face pushed up close to Eleanor's. I was taking it home, damn you, damn you! I'm so sorry, Eleanor said. She bent down, but it did not seem possible to scoop up the fragments of tomato and cheesecake and shove them somehow back into the broken bag. The old lady was scowling down and snatching up her other packages before Eleanor could reach them, and at last, Eleanor rose, smiling in convulsive apology. I'm really so sorry, she said. Damn you, the little old lady said, but more quietly. I was taking it home for my little lunch, and now, thanks to you, perhaps I could pay? Eleanor took hold of her pocketbook, and the little lady stood very still and thought. I couldn't take money just like that, she said at last. I didn't buy the things, you see. They were left over. She snapped her lips angrily. You should have seen the ham they had, she said. But someone else got that. And the chocolate cake. And the potato salad. And the little candies in the little paper dishes. I was too late on everything. And now, she and Eleanor both glanced down at the mess on the sidewalk, and the little lady said, So you see, I couldn't just take money. Not money just from your hand. Not for something that was left over. May I buy you something to replace this then? I'm in a terrible hurry, but if we could find some place that's open. The little old lady smiled wickedly. I've still got this anyway, she said, and she hugged one package tight. You may pay my taxi fare home, she said. Then no one else will be likely to knock me down. Gladly, Eleanor said, and turned to the taxi driver, who had been waiting, interested. Can you take this lady home? She asked. A couple of dollars will do it, the little lady said. Not including the tip for this gentleman, of course. Being as small as I am, she explained daintily. It's quite a hazard, Quite a hazard indeed. People knocking you down. Still, it's a genuine pleasure to find one as willing as you to make up for it. Sometimes the people who knock you down never turn once to look. With Eleanor's help, she climbed into the taxi with her packages, and Eleanor took $2 and a 50-cent piece from her pocketbook and handed them to the little lady, who clutched them tight in her tiny hand. "All right, sweetheart," the taxi driver said. "Where do we go?" The little lady chuckled. "I'll tell you after we start," she said. And then, to Eleanor, "Good luck to you, dearie. Watch out from now on how you go knocking people down." "Goodbye," Eleanor said. "And I'm really very sorry." "That's fine then," the little lady said, waving at her as the taxi pulled away from the curb. "I'll be praying for you, dearie." Well, Eleanor thought, staring after the taxi. There's one person anyway who will be praying for me. One person anyway. 4. It was the first genuinely shining day of summer, a time of year which brought Eleanor always to aching memories of her early childhood, when it had seemed to be summer all the time. She could not remember a winter before her father's death on a cold, wet day. She had taken to wondering lately, during these swift-counted years, what had been done with all those wasted summer days. How could she have spent them so wantonly? "I am foolish," she told herself early every summer. "I am very foolish. I am grown up now and know the values of things. Nothing is ever really wasted," she believed sensibly, even one's childhood. And then each year, one summer morning, the warm wind would come down the city street where she walked, and she would be touched with the little cold thought, "I have let more time go by." Yet this morning, driving the little car which she and her sister owned together, apprehensive lest they might still realize that she had come after all and just taken it away, going docilely along the street, following the lines of traffic, stopping when she was bidden and turning when she could, she smiled out at the sunlight slanting along the street and thought, "I am going. I am going. I have finally taken a step." Always before, when she had her sister's permission to drive the little car, she had gone cautiously, moving with extreme care to avoid even the slightest scratch or mar which might irritate her sister. But today, with her carton on the back seat and her suitcase on the floor, her gloves and pocketbook and light coat on the seat beside her, the car belonged entirely to her, a little contained world all her own. "I am really going," she thought. At the last traffic light in the city, before she turned to go onto the great highway out of town, she stopped waiting and slid Dr. Montague's letter out of her pocketbook. "I will not even need a map," she thought. "He must be a very careful man." "Route 39 to Ashton," the letter said, "and then turn left onto Route 5 going west. Follow this for a little less than 30 miles, and you will come to the small village of Hillsdale. Go through Hillsdale to the corner with a gas station on the left and a church on the right, and turn left here onto what seems to be a narrow country road. You will be going up into the hills, and the road is very poor. Follow this road to the end about 6 miles, and you will come to the gates of Hill House. I am making these directions so detailed because it is inadvisable to stop in Hillsdale to ask your way. The people there are rude to strangers and openly hostile to anyone inquiring about Hill House. I am very happy that you will be joining us in Hill House, and will take great pleasure in making your acquaintance on Thursday the 21st of June. The light changed. She turned onto the highway and was free of the city. No one, she thought, can catch me now. They don't even know which way I'm going. She had never driven far alone before. The notion of dividing her lovely journey into miles and hours was silly. She saw it, bringing her car with precision between the line on the road and the line of trees beside the road, as a passage of moments, each one new, carrying her along with them, taking her down a path of incredible novelty to a new place. The journey itself was her positive action. her destination vague, unimagined, perhaps non-existent. She meant to savor each turn of her traveling, loving the road and the trees and the houses and the small, ugly towns, teasing herself with the notion that she might take it into her head to stop just anywhere and never leave again. She might pull her car to the side of the highway. Although that was not allowed, she told herself she would be punished if she really did, and leave it behind while she wandered off past the trees into the soft, welcoming country beyond. She might wander till she was exhausted, chasing butterflies or following a stream, and then come at nightfall to the hut of some poor woodcutter who would offer her shelter. She might make her home forever in East Barrington or Desmond, or the incorporated village of Burke. She might never leave the road at all, but just hurry on until the wheels of the car were worn to nothing, and she had come to the end of the world. And, she thought, I might just go along to Hill House where I am expected and where I am being given shelter and room and board, and a small token salary in consideration of forsaking my commitments and involvements in the city and running away to see the world. I wonder what Dr. Montague is like. I wonder what Hill House is like. I wonder who else will be there. She was well away from the city now, watching for the turning onto Route 39, that magic thread of road Dr. Montague had chosen for her, out of all the roads in the world to bring her safely to him and to Hill House. No other road could lead her from where she was to where she wanted to be. Dr. Montague was confirmed, made infallible. Under the sign which pointed the way to Route 39 was another sign saying, Ashton, 121 miles. The road, her intimate friend now, turned and dipped, going around turns where surprises waited. Once a cow regarding her over a fence, once an incurious dog, down into hollows where small towns lay, past fields and orchards. On the main street of one village she passed a vast house, pillared and walled, with shutters over the windows and a pair of stone lions guarding the steps. And she thought that perhaps she might live there, dusting the lions each morning and patting their heads good night. Time is beginning this morning in June, she assured herself. But it is a time that is strangely new and of itself. In these few seconds I have lived a lifetime in a house with 2 lions in front. Every morning I swept the porch and dusted the lions, and every evening I patted their heads good night. And once a week I washed their faces and manes and paws with warm water and soda, and cleaned between their teeth with a swab. Inside the house, the rooms were tall and clear with shining floors and polished windows. A little dainty old lady took care of me, moving starchily with a silver tea service on a tray, and bringing me a glass of elderberry wine each evening for my health's sake. I took my dinner alone in the long, quiet dining room at the gleaming table, and between the tall windows the white paneling of the walls shone in the candlelight. I dined upon a bird and radishes from the garden and homemade plum jam. When I slept, it was under a canopy of white organdy, and a nightlight guarded me from the hall. People bowed to me on the streets of the town because everyone was very proud of my lions. When I died, she had left the town far behind by now and was going past dirty, closed lunch stands and torn signs. There had been a fair somewhere near here once, long ago, with motorcycle races. The sign still carried fragments of words. Dare, one of them read, and another, evil. And she laughed at herself, perceiving how she sought out omens everywhere. The word is daredevil, Eleanor, daredevil drivers. And she slowed her car because she was driving too fast and might reach Hill House too soon. At one spot, she stopped altogether beside the road to stare in disbelief and wonder. Along the road, for perhaps a quarter of a mile, she had been passing and admiring a row of splendid tended oleanders, blooming pink and white in a steady row. Now she had come to the gateway they protected, and past the gateway the trees continued. The gateway was no more than a pair of ruined stone pillars, with a road leading away between them into empty fields. She could see that the oleander trees cut away from the road and ran up each side of a great square. And she could see all the way to the farther side of the square, which was a line of oleander trees seemingly going along a little river. Inside the oleander square there was nothing, no house, no building, nothing but the straight road going across and ending at the stream. Now what was here, she wondered. What was here and is gone? Or what was going to be here and never came? Was it going to be a house or a garden or an orchard? Were they driven away forever, or are they coming back? Oleanders are poisonous, she remembered. Could they be here guarding something? Will I, she thought. Will I get out of my car and go between the ruined gates and then, once I am in the magic oleander square, find that I have wandered into a fairyland, protected poisonously from the eyes of people passing? Once I have stepped between the magic gateposts, will I find myself through the protective barrier, the spell broken? I will go into a sweet garden with fountains and low benches and roses trained over arbors, and find one path, jeweled perhaps with rubies and emeralds, soft enough for a king's daughter to walk upon with her little sandaled feet, and it will lead me directly to the palace which lies under a spell. I will walk up low stone steps past stone lions guarding, and into a courtyard where a fountain plays and the queen waits weeping for the princess to return. She will drop her embroidery when she sees me, and cry out to the palace servants, stirring, at last after their long sleep, to prepare a great feast because the enchantment is ended and the palace is itself again. And we shall live happily ever after. No, of course, she thought, turning to start her car again. Once the palace becomes visible and the spell is broken, the whole spell will be broken, and all this countryside outside the oleanders will return to its proper form, fading away towns and signs and cows, into a soft green picture from a fairy tale. Then coming down from the hills there will be a prince riding, bright in green and silver with 100 bowmen riding behind him, pennants stirring, horses tossing, jewels flashing. She laughed and turned to smile goodbye at the magic oleanders. Another day, she told them. Another day I'll come back and break your spell. She stopped for lunch after she had driven 100 miles and a mile. She found a country restaurant which advertised itself as an old mill, and found herself seated, incredibly, upon a balcony over a dashing stream, looking down upon wet rocks and the intoxicating sparkle of moving water, with a cut glass bowl of cottage cheese on the table before her, and corn sticks in a napkin. Because this was a time, and a land where enchantments were swiftly made and broken, she wanted to linger over her lunch, knowing that Hill House always waited for her at the end of her day. The only other people in the dining room were a family party, a mother and father with a small boy and girl, and they talked to one another softly and gently. And once the little girl turned and regarded Eleanor with frank curiosity, and after a minute smiled. The lights from the stream below touched the ceiling and the polished tables and glanced along the little girl's curls, and the little girl's mother said, "She wants her cup of stars." Eleanor looked up, surprised. The little girl was sliding back in her chair, sullenly refusing her milk, while her father frowned and her brother giggled and her mother said calmly, "She wants her cup of stars." Indeed, yes, Eleanor thought. Indeed, so do I. A cup of stars, of course. Her little cup, the mother was explaining, smiling apologetically at the waitress, who was thunderstruck at the thought that the mill's good country milk was not rich enough for the little girl. "It has stars in the bottom and she always drinks her milk from it at home. She calls it her cup of stars because she can see the stars while she drinks her milk." The waitress nodded, unconvinced, and the mother told the little girl, "You'll have your milk from your cup of stars tonight when we get home. But just for now, just to be a very good little girl, will you take a little milk from this glass?" "Don't do it," Eleanor told the little girl. "Insist on your cup of stars." Once they have trapped you into being like everyone else, you will never see your cup of stars again. Don't do it." And the little girl glanced at her and smiled a little subtle, dimpling, wholly comprehending smile, and shook her head stubbornly at the glass. Brave girl, Eleanor thought. Wise, brave girl. "You're spoiling her," the father said. "She ought not to be allowed these whims." "Just this once," the mother said. She put down the glass of milk and touched the little girl gently on the hand. "Eat your ice cream," she said. When they left, the little girl waved goodbye to Eleanor, and Eleanor waved back, sitting in joyful loneliness to finish her coffee while the gay stream tumbled along below her. "I have not very much farther to go," Eleanor thought. "I am more than halfway there." Journey's end, she thought, and far back in her mind, sparkling like the little stream, a tag end of a tune danced through her head, bringing distantly a word or so. "In delay there lies no plenty," she thought. "In delay there lies no plenty." She nearly stopped forever just outside Ashton, because she came to a tiny cottage buried in a garden. "I could live there all alone," she thought, slowing the car to look down the winding garden path to the small blue front door with perfectly a white cat on the step. No one would ever find me there either, behind all those roses, and just to make sure I would plant oleanders by the road. I will light a fire in the cool evenings and toast apples at my own hearth. I will raise white cats and sew white curtains for the windows and sometimes come out of my door to go to the store to buy cinnamon and tea and thread. People will come to me to have their fortunes told, and I will brew love potions for sad maidens. I will have a robin." But the cottage was far behind, and it was time to look for her new road, so carefully charted by Dr. Montague. "Turn left onto Route 5 going west," his letter said, and as efficiently and promptly as though he had been guiding her from some spot far away, moving her car with controls in his hands, it was done. She was on Route 5 going west, and her journey was nearly done. In spite of what he said, though, she thought, "I will stop in Hillsdale for a minute just for a cup of coffee, because I cannot bear to have my long trip end so soon." It was not really disobeying, anyway. The letter said it was inadvisable to stop in Hillsdale to ask the way, not forbidden to stop for coffee, and perhaps if I don't mention Hill House I will not be doing wrong. Anyway, she thought obscurely, it's my last chance. Hillsdale was upon her before she knew it, a tangled, disorderly mess of dirty houses and crooked streets. It was small. Once she had come onto the main street, she could see the corner at the end with the gas station and the church. There seemed to be only one place to stop for coffee, and that was an unattractive diner, but Eleanor was bound to stop in Hillsdale, and so she brought her car to the broken curb in front of the diner and got out. After a minute's thought, with a silent nod to Hillsdale, she locked the car, mindful of her suitcase on the floor and the carton on the back seat. I will not spend long in Hillsdale, she thought, looking up and down the street, which managed, even in the sunlight, to be dark and ugly. A dog slept uneasily in the shade against a wall. A woman stood in a doorway across the street and looked at Eleanor, and two young boys lounged against a fence, elaborately silent. Eleanor, who was afraid of strange dogs and jeering women and young hoodlums, went quickly into the diner, clutching her pocketbook and her car keys. Inside she found a counter with a chinless, tired girl behind it, and a man sitting at the end eating. She wondered briefly how hungry he must have been to come in here at all when she looked at the gray counter and the smeared glass bowl over a plate of donuts. "Coffee?" she said to the girl behind the counter, and the girl turned wearily and tumbled down a cup from the piles on the shelves. "I will have to drink this coffee because I said I was going to," Eleanor told herself sternly, but next time I will listen to Dr. Montague. There was some elaborate joke going on between the man eating and the girl behind the counter. When she set Eleanor's coffee down, she glanced at him and half smiled, and he shrugged. And then the girl laughed. Eleanor looked up, but the girl was examining her fingernails and the man was wiping his plate with bread. Perhaps Eleanor's coffee was poisoned. It certainly looked it. Determined to plumb the village of Hillsdale to its lowest depths, Eleanor said to the girl, "I'll have one of those donuts too, please." And the girl, glancing sideways at the man, slid one of the donuts onto a dish and set it down in front of Eleanor and laughed when she caught another look from the man. "This is a pretty little town," Eleanor said to the girl. "What is it called?" The girl stared at her. Perhaps no one had ever before had the audacity to call Hillsdale a pretty little town. After a moment, the girl looked again at the man, as though calling for confirmation, and said, "Hillsdale? Have you lived here long?" Eleanor asked. "I'm not going to mention Hill House," she assured Dr. Montague far away. "I just want to waste a little time." "Yeah," the girl said. "It must be pleasant living in a small town like this. I come from the city." "Yeah? Do you like it? Here?" "It's all right," the girl said. She looked again at the man who was listening carefully. "Not much to do." "How large a town is it?" "Pretty small. You want more coffee?" This was addressed to the man who was rattling his cup against his saucer, and Eleanor took a first shuddering sip of her own coffee and wondered how he could possibly want more. "Do you have a lot of visitors around here?" she asked when the girl had filled the coffee cup and gone back to lounge against the shelves. "Tourists, I mean." "What for?" For a minute the girl flashed at her from what might have been an emptiness greater than any Eleanor had ever known. Why would anybody come here? She looked sullenly at the man and added, "There's not even a movie. But the hills are so pretty. Mostly with small, out-of-the-way towns like this one, you'll find city people who have come and built themselves homes up in the hills. For privacy." The girl laughed shortly. "Nuther they don't. Or remodeling old houses. Privacy," the girl said and laughed again. "It just seems surprising," Eleanor said, feeling the man looking at her. "Yeah," the girl said. "If they'd put in a movie, even." "I thought," Eleanor said carefully, "that I might even look around. Old houses are usually cheap, you know, and it's fun to make them over." "Not around here," the girl said. "Then," Eleanor said, "there are no old houses around here back in the hills?" "Nope." The man rose, taking change from his pocket, and spoke for the first time. "People leave this town," he said. "They don't come here." When the door closed behind him, the girl turned her flat eyes back to Eleanor, almost resentfully, as though Eleanor with her chatter had driven the man away. "He was right," she said finally. "They go away, the lucky ones." "Why don't you run away?" Eleanor asked her, and the girl shrugged. "Would I be any better off?" she asked. She took Eleanor's money without interest and returned the change. Then, with another of her quick flashes, she glanced at the empty plates at the end of the counter and almost smiled. "He comes in every day," she said. When Eleanor smiled back and started to speak, the girl turned her back and busied herself with the cups on the shelves, and Eleanor, feeling herself dismissed, rose gratefully from her coffee and took up her car keys and pocketbook. "Goodbye," Eleanor said, and the girl, back still turned, said, "Good luck to you. I hope you find your house." 5. The road leading away from the gas station and the church was very poor indeed, deeply rutted and rocky. Eleanor's little car stumbled and bounced, reluctant to go farther into these unattractive hills. where the day seemed quickly drawing to an end under the thick, oppressive trees on either side. They do not really seem to have much traffic on this road, Eleanor thought wryly, turning the wheel quickly to avoid a particularly vicious rock ahead. 6 miles of this will not do the car any good. And for the first time in hours she thought of her sister and laughed. By now they would surely know that she had taken the car and gone, but they would not know where. They would be telling each other incredulously that they would never have suspected it of Eleanor. I would never have suspected it of myself, she thought, laughing still. Everything is different. I am a new person, very far from home. In delay, there lies no plenty, present. Mirth hath present laughter. And she gasped as the car cracked against a rock and reeled back across the road with an ominous scraping somewhere beneath, but then gathered itself together valiantly and resumed its dogged climb. The tree branches brushed against the windshield, and it grew steadily darker. Hill House likes to make an entrance, she thought. I wonder if the sun ever shines along here. At last, with one final effort, the car cleared a tangle of dead leaves and small branches across the road and came into a clearing by the gate of Hill House. Why am I here? She thought helplessly, and at once, why am I here? The gate was tall and ominous and heavy, set strongly into a stone wall which went off through the trees. Even from the car she could see the padlock and the chain that was twisted around and through the bars. Beyond the gate she could see only that the road continued, turned, shadowed on either side by the still dark trees. Since the gate was so clearly locked and double-locked and chained and barred, who, she wondered, wants so badly to get in? She made no attempt to get out of her car, but pressed the horn and the trees, and the gate shuddered and withdrew, slightly from the sound. After a minute she blew the horn again and then saw a man coming toward her from inside the gate. He was as dark and unwelcoming as the padlock, and before he moved toward the gate he peered through the bars at her, scowling. What you want? His voice was sharp, mean. I want to come in, please. Please unlock the gate. Who say? Why? She faltered. I am supposed to come in, she said at last. What for? I am expected. Or am I? She wondered suddenly. Is this as far as I go? Who by? She knew, of course, that he was delighting in exceeding his authority, as though once he moved to unlock the gate he would lose the little temporary superiority he thought he had. And what superiority have I, she wondered. I am outside the gate, after all. She could already see that losing her temper, which she did rarely because she was so afraid of being ineffectual, would only turn him away, leaving her still outside the gate, railing futilely. She could even anticipate his innocence if he were reproved later for this arrogance, the maliciously vacant grin, the wide blank eyes, the whining voice protesting that he would have let her in, Hepland to let her in. But how could he be sure? He had his orders, didn't he? And he had to do what he was told? He'd be the one to get in trouble, wouldn't he, if he let in someone wasn't supposed to be inside? She could anticipate his shrug, and picturing him, laughed. Perhaps the worst thing she could have done. Eyeing her, he moved back from the gate. You better come back later, he said, and turned his back with an air of virtuous triumph. Listen, she called after him, still trying not to sound angry. I am one of Dr. Montague's guests. He will be expecting me in the house. Please listen to me. He turned and grinned at her. They couldn't rightly be expecting you, he said, seeing as you're the only one's come, so far. Do you mean that there's no one in the house? No one I know of. Maybe my wife getting it fixed up. So they couldn't be there exactly expecting you, now could they? She sat back against the car seat and closed her eyes. Hill House, she thought. You're as hard to get into as heaven. I suppose you know what you're asking for. Coming here? I suppose they told you. Back in the city? You hear anything about this place? I heard that I was invited here as a guest of Dr. Montague's. When you open the gates, I will go inside. I'll open them. I'm going to open them. I just want to be sure you know what's waiting for you in there. You ever been here before? One of the family, maybe? He looked at her now, peering through the bars, his jeering face one more. Barrier after padlock and chain. I can't let you in till I'm azure, can I? What'd you say your name was? She sighed. Eleanor Vance. Not one of the family then, I guess. You ever hear anything about this place? It's my chance, I suppose, she thought. I'm being given a last chance. I could turn my car around right here and now in front of these gates and go away from here, and no one would blame me. Anyone has a right to run away. She put her head out through the car window and said with fury, My name is Eleanor Vance. I am expected in Hill House. Unlock those gates at once. All right, deliberately making a wholly unnecessary display of fitting the key and turning it. He opened the padlock and loosened the chain and swung the gates just wide enough for the car to come through. Eleanor moved the car slowly, but the alacrity with which he leaped to the side of the road made her think for a minute that he had perceived the fleeting impulse crossing her mind. She laughed and then stopped the car because he was coming toward her, safely from the side. You won't like it, he said. You'll be sorry I ever opened that gate. Out of the way, please, she said. You've held me up long enough. You think they could get anyone else to open this gate? You think anyone else stay around here that long except me and my wife? You think we can have things just about the way we want them, long as we stay around here and fix up the house and open the gates for all you city people think you know everything? Please get away from my car. She dared not admit to herself that he frightened her, for fear that he might perceive it. His nearness leaning against the side of the car was ugly, and his enormous resentment puzzled her. She had certainly made him open the gate for her, but did he think of the house and gardens inside as his own? A name from Dr. Montague's letter came into her mind, and she asked curiously, Are you Dudley, the caretaker? Yes, I'm Dudley, the caretaker. He mimicked her. Who else you think would be around here? The honest old family retainer, she thought, proud and loyal and thoroughly unpleasant. You and your wife take care of the house all alone? Who else? It was his boast, his curse, his refrain. She moved restlessly, afraid to draw away from him too obviously, and yet wanting, with small motions of starting the car, to make him stand aside. I'm sure you'll be able to make us very comfortable, you and your wife, she said, putting a tone of finality into her voice. Meanwhile, I'm very anxious to get to the house as soon as possible. He snickered, disagreeably. Me now, he said, me, I don't hang around here after dark. Grinning, satisfied with himself, he stood away from the car, and Eleanor was grateful, although awkward starting the car under his eye. Perhaps he will keep popping out at me all along the drive, she thought, a sneering Cheshire cat yelling each time that I should be happy to find anyone willing to hang around this place until dark anyway. To show that she was not at all affected by the thought of the face of Dudley the caretaker between the trees, she began to whistle, a little annoyed to find that the same tune still ran through her head. Present mirth hath present laughter. And she told herself crossly that she must really make an effort to think of something else. She was sure that the rest of the words must be most unsuitable to hide so stubbornly from her memory, and probably wholly disreputable to be caught, singing on her arrival at Hill House. Over the trees, occasionally between them and the hills, she caught glimpses of what must be the roofs, perhaps a tower of Hill House. They made houses so oddly back when Hill House was built, she thought. They put towers and turrets and buttresses and wooden lace on them, even sometimes Gothic spires and gargoyles. Nothing was ever left undecorated. Perhaps Hill House has a tower or a secret chamber or even a passageway going off into the hills and probably used by smugglers. Although, what could smugglers find to smuggle around these lonely hills? Perhaps I will encounter a devilishly handsome smuggler, and she turned her car onto the last stretch of straight drive, leading her directly, face to Hill House, and, moving without thought, pressed her foot on the brake to stall the car and sat, staring. The house was vile. She shivered and thought, the words coming freely into her mind. Hill House is vile, it is diseased, get away from here at once. Chapter 2. No human eye can isolate the unhappy coincidence of line and place which suggests evil in the face of a house, and yet somehow a maniac juxtaposition, a badly turned angle, some chance meeting of roof and sky, turned Hill House into a place of despair. More frightening because the face of Hill House seemed awake, with a watchfulness from the blank windows and a touch of glee in the eyebrow of a cornice. Almost any house, caught unexpectedly or at an odd angle, can turn a deeply humorous look on a watching person. Even a mischievous little chimney, or a dormer like a dimple, can catch up a beholder with a sense of fellowship. But a house arrogant and hating, never off guard, can only be evil. This house, which seemed somehow to have formed itself, flying together into its own powerful pattern under the hands of its builders, fitting itself into its own construction of lines and angles, reared its great head back against the sky without concession to humanity. It was a house without kindness, never meant to be lived in, not a fit place for people or for love or for hope. Exorcism cannot alter the countenance of a house. Hill House would stay as it was until it was destroyed. I should have turned back at the gate, Eleanor thought. The house had caught her with an atavistic turn in the pit of the stomach, and she looked along the lines of its roofs, fruitlessly endeavoring to locate the badness whatever dwelt there. Her hands turned nervously cold so that she fumbled, trying to take out a cigarette, and beyond everything else she was afraid, listening to the sick voice inside her which whispered, "Get away from here, get away." But this is what I came so far to find, she told herself. I can't go back. Besides, he would laugh at me if I tried to get back out through that gate. Trying not to look up at the house, and she could not even have told its color, or its style, or its size, except that it was enormous and dark, looking down over her. She started the car again and drove up the last bit of driveway directly to the steps, which led in a forthright, no-escape manner onto the veranda, and aimed at the front door. The drive turned off on either side to encircle the house, and probably later she could take her car around and find a building of some kind to put it in. Now she felt uneasily that she did not care to cut off her means of departure too completely. She turned the car just enough to move it off to one side, out of the way of later arrivals. It would be a pity, she thought grimly, for anyone to get a first look at this house with anything so comforting as a human automobile parked in front of it, and got out, taking her suitcase and her coat. Well, she thought inadequately, here I am. It was an act of moral strength to lift her foot and set it on the bottom step, and she thought that her deep unwillingness to touch Hill House for the first time came directly from the vivid feeling that it was waiting for her, evil, but patient. Journeys end in lovers' meeting, she thought, remembering her song at last, and laughed, standing on the steps of Hill House. Journeys end in lovers' meeting, and she put her feet down firmly and went up to the veranda and the door. Hill House came around her in a rush. She was enshadowed, and the sound of her feet on the wood of the veranda was an outrage in the utter silence, as though it had been a very long time since feet stamped across the boards of Hill House. She brought her hand up to the heavy iron knocker that had a child's face, determined to make more noise and yet more, so that Hill House might be very sure she was there. And then the door opened without warning, and she was looking at a woman who, if like ever merited like, could only be the wife of the man at the gate. "Mrs. Dudley," she said, catching her breath. "I'm Eleanor Vance. I'm expected." Silently, the woman stood aside. Her apron was clean, her hair was neat, and yet she gave an indefinable air of dirtiness, quite in keeping with her husband. And the suspicious sullenness of her face was a match for the malicious petulance of his. No, Eleanor told herself. It's partly because everything seems so dark around here, and partly because I expected that man's wife to be ugly. If I hadn't seen Hill House, would I be so unfair to these people? They only take care of it after all. The hall in which they stood was overfull of dark wood and weighty carving, dim under the heaviness of the staircase which lay back from the farther end. Above, there seemed to be another hallway, going the width of the house. She could see a wide landing and then, across the staircase well, doors closed along the upper hale. On either side of her now were great double doors, carved with fruit and grain and living things. All the doors she could see in this house were closed. When she tried to speak, her voice was drowned in the dim stillness, and she had to try again to make a sound. "Can you take me to my room?" she asked at last, gesturing toward her suitcase on the floor and watching the wavering reflection of her hand going down and down into the deep shadows of the polished floor. "I gather I'm the first one here. You did say you were Mrs. Dudley?" "I think I'm going to cry," she thought, like a child sobbing and wailing. "I don't like it here." Mrs. Dudley turned and started up the stairs, and Eleanor took up her suitcase and followed, hurrying after anything else alive in this house. "No," she thought, "I don't like it here." Mrs. Dudley came to the top of the stairs and turned right, and Eleanor saw that with some rare perception, the builders of the house had given up any attempt at style, probably after realizing what the house was going to be, whether they chose it or not, and had on the second floor set in a long straight hale to accommodate the doors to the bedrooms. She had a quick impression of the builders finishing off the second and third stories of the house with a kind of indecent haste, eager to finish their work without embellishment and get out of there, following the simplest possible pattern for the rooms. At the left end of the hale was a second staircase, probably going from servants' rooms on the third floor down past the second to the service rooms below. At the right end of the hale, another room had been set in, perhaps, since it was on the end, to get the maximum amount of sun and light. Except for a continuation of the dark woodwork and what looked like a series of poorly executed engravings arranged with unlovely exactness along the hale in either direction, nothing broke the straightness of the hale except the series of doors, all closed. Mrs. Dudley crossed the hale and opened a door, perhaps at random. "This is the blue room," she said. From the turn in the staircase, Eleanor assumed that the room would be at the front of the house. Sister Anne, she thought, and moved gratefully toward the light from the room. "How nice," she said, standing in the doorway, but only from the sense that she must say something. It was not nice at all, and only barely tolerable. It held and closed the same clashing disharmony that marked Hill House throughout. Mrs. Dudley turned aside to let Eleanor come in and spoke, apparently to the wall. "I set dinner on the dining room sideboard at 6 sharp, she said. "You can serve yourselves. I clear up in the morning. I have breakfast ready for you at 9. That's the way I agreed to do. I can keep the rooms up the way you'd like, but there's no one else you could get that would help me. I don't wait on people. What I agreed to, it doesn't mean I wait on people." Eleanor nodded, standing uncertainly in the doorway. "I don't stay after I set out dinner," Mrs. Dudley went on, "not after it begins to get dark. I leave before dark comes." "I know," Eleanor said. "We live over in the town, 6 miles away." "Yes," Eleanor said, remembering Hillsdale. "So there won't be anyone around if you need help." "I understand. We couldn't even hear you in the night." "I don't suppose no one could. No one lives any nearer than the town. No one else will come any nearer than that." "I know," Eleanor said tiredly. "In the night," Mrs. Dudley said and smiled outright. "In the dark," she said, and closed the door behind her. Eleanor almost giggled, thinking of herself calling, "Oh, Mrs. Dudley, I need your help in the dark." And then she shivered. She stood alone beside her suitcase, her coat still hanging over her arm, thoroughly miserable, telling herself helplessly, journeys end in lovers' meeting, and wishing she could go home. Behind her lay the dark staircase and the polished hallway, and the great front door, and Mrs. Dudley and Dudley laughing at the gate and the padlocks, and Hillsdale, and the cottage of flowers, and the family at the inn, and the oleander garden, and the house with the stone lions in front, and they had brought her, under Dr. Montague's unerring eye, to the blue room at Hill House. It's awful, she thought, unwilling to move, since motion might imply acceptance, a gesture of moving in. It's awful and I don't want to stay, but there was nowhere else to go. Dr. Montague's letter had brought her this far, and could take her no farther. After a minute she sighed and shook her head, and walked across to set her suitcase down on the bed. "Here I am in the blue room of Hill House," she said half aloud. Although it was real enough and beyond all question a blue room, there were blue dimity curtains over the two windows which looked out over the roof of the veranda onto the lawn, and a blue-figured rug on the floor, and a blue spread on the bed, and a blue quilt at the foot. The walls, dark woodwork to shoulder, height, were blue-figured paper above, with a design of tiny blue flowers, wreathed and gathered and delicate. Perhaps someone had once hoped to lighten the air of the blue room in Hill House with a dainty wallpaper, not seeing how such a hope would evaporate in Hill House, leaving only the faintest hint of its existence, like an almost inaudible echo of sobbing far away. Eleanor shook herself, turning to see the room complete. It had an unbelievably faulty design which left it chillingly wrong in all its dimensions, so that the walls seemed always in one direction a fraction longer than the eye could endure, and in another direction a fraction less than the barest possible tolerable length. "This is where they want me to sleep," Eleanor thought incredulously. What nightmares are waiting, shadowed in those high corners? What breath of mindless fear will drift across my mouth? And shook herself again. "Really," she told herself. "Really, Eleanor." She opened her suitcase on the high bed and, slipping off her stiff city shoes with grateful relief, began to unpack. At the back of her mind the thoroughly female conviction that the best way to soothe a troubled mind is to put on comfortable shoes. Yesterday, packing her suitcase in the city, she had chosen clothes which she assumed would be suitable for wearing in an isolated country house. She had even run out at the last minute and bought, excited at her own daring, 2 pairs of slacks, something she had not worn in more years than she could remember. Mother would be furious, she had thought, packing the slacks down at the bottom of her suitcase so that she need not take them out, need never let anyone know she had them in case she lost her courage. Now, in Hill House, they no longer seemed so new. She unpacked carelessly, setting dresses crookedly on hangers, tossing the slacks into the bottom drawer of the high marble-topped dresser, throwing her city shoes into a corner of the great wardrobe. She was bored already with the books she had brought. "I'm probably not going to stay anyway," she thought, and closed her empty suitcase and set it in the wardrobe corner. "It won't take me 5 minutes to pack again." She discovered that she had been trying to put her suitcase down without making a sound, and then realized that while she unpacked, neglect and mismanagement. I cannot discover that these suggestions were ever taken seriously. There is no record whatever of any but the most formal notice of the older sister's death, and certainly the villagers would have been the first to wonder if there had been any oddness about the death. The companion won her case at last, and could, in my opinion, have won a case for slander besides, and the house became legally hers, although the younger sister never gave up trying to get it. She kept after the unfortunate companion with letters and threats, made the wildest accusations against her everywhere, and in the local police records, there is listed at least one occasion when the companion was forced to apply for police protection to prevent her enemy from attacking her with a broom. The companion went in terror, seemingly, her house burgled at night. She never stopped insisting that they came and stole things, and I read one pathetic letter in which she complained that she had not spent a peaceful night in the house since the death of her benefactor. Oddly enough, sympathy around the village was almost entirely with the younger sister, perhaps because the companion, once a village girl, was now lady of the manor. The villagers believed, and still believe, I think, that the younger sister was defrauded of her inheritance by a scheming young woman. They did not believe that she would murder her friend, you see, but they were delighted to believe that she was dishonest, certainly because they were capable of dishonesty themselves. When opportunity arose, well, gossip is always a bad enemy. When the poor creature killed herself, Eleanor, shocked into speech, half rose. She had to kill herself? You mean, was there another way of escaping her tormentor? She certainly did not seem to think so. It was accepted locally that she had chosen suicide because her guilty conscience drove her to it. I am more inclined to believe that she was one of those tenacious, unclever young women who can hold on desperately to what they believe is their own, but cannot withstand, mentally, a constant nagging persecution. She had certainly no weapons to fight back against the younger sister's campaign of hatred. Her own friends in the village had been turned against her, and she seems to have been maddened by the conviction that locks and bolts could not keep out the enemy who stole into her house at night. She should have gone away, Eleanor said, left the house and run as far as she could go. In effect, she did. I really think the poor girl was hated to death. She hanged herself, by the way. Gossip says she hanged herself from the turret on the tower. But when you have a house, like Hill House with a tower and a turret, gossip would hardly allow you to hang yourself anywhere else. After her death, the house passed legally into the hands of the Sanderson family, who were cousins of hers and in no way as vulnerable to the Piercestons of the younger sister, who must have been a little demented herself by that time. I heard from Mrs. Sanderson that when the family, it would have been her husband's parents, first came to see the house, the younger sister showed up to abuse them, standing on the road to howl at them as they went by, and found herself packed right off to the local police station. And that seems to be the end of the younger sister's part in the story. From the day the first Sanderson sent her packing to the brief notice of her death a few years later, she seems to have spent her time brooding silently over her wrongs, but far away from the Sandersons. Oddly enough, in all her ranting, she insisted always on one point. She had not, would not, come into this house at night to steal or for any other reason. Was anything ever really stolen? Luke asked. As I told you, the companion was finally pressed into saying that one or two things seemed to be missing, but could not say for sure. As you can imagine, the story of the nightly intruder did a good deal to enhance Hill House's further reputation. Moreover, the Sandersons did not live here at all. They spent a few days in the house, telling the villagers that they were preparing it for their immediate occupancy, and then abruptly cleared out, closing the house the way it stood. They told around the village that urgent business took them to live in the city, but the villagers thought they knew better. No one has lived in the house since for more than a few days at a time. It has been on the market for sale or rent ever since. Well, that is a long story. I need more brandy. Those two poor little girls, Eleanor said, looking into the fire. I can't forget them, walking through these dark rooms, trying to play dolls maybe, in here or those bedrooms, upstairs. And so the old house has just been sitting here. Luke put out a tentative finger and touched the marble cupid gingerly. Nothing in it touched, nothing used, nothing here wanted by anyone anymore. Just sitting here thinking. And waiting, Eleanor said. And waiting. the doctor confirmed. Essentially, he went on slowly. The evil is the house itself, I think. It has enchained and destroyed its people and their lives. It is a place of contained ill will. Well, tomorrow you will see it all. The Sandersons put in electricity and plumbing and a telephone when they first thought to live here. But otherwise, nothing has been changed. Well, Luke said after a little silence, I am sure we will all be very comfortable here. 5. Eleanor found herself unexpectedly admiring her own feet. Theodora dreamed over the fire just beyond the tips of her toes, and Eleanor thought with deep satisfaction that her feet were handsome in their red sandals. What a complete and separate thing I am, she thought, going from my red toes to the top of my head, individually an I, possessed of attributes belonging only to me. I have red shoes, she thought. That goes with being Eleanor. I dislike lobster, and sleep on my left side and crack my knuckles when I am nervous and save buttons. I am holding a brandy glass which is mine because I am here, and I am using it and I have a place in this room. I have red shoes, and tomorrow I will wake up and I will still be here. I have red shoes, she said very softly, and Theodora turned and smiled up at her. I'd intended, and the doctor looked around at them with bright, anxious optimism. I'd intended to ask if you all played bridge? Of course, Eleanor said. I play bridge, she thought. I used to have a cat named Dancer. I can swim. I'm afraid not, Theodora said, and the other three turned and regarded her with frank dismay. Not at all? The doctor asked. I've been playing bridge twice a week for 11 years, Eleanor said, with my mother and her lawyer and his wife. I'm sure you must play as well as that. Maybe you could teach me? Theodora asked. I'm quick at learning games. Oh dear, the doctor said, and Eleanor and Luke laughed. We'll do something else instead, Eleanor said. I can play bridge, she thought. I like apple pie with sour cream, and I drove here by myself. Backgammon, the doctor said with bitterness. I play a fair game of chess, Luke said to the doctor, who cheered at once. Theodora set her mouth stubbornly. I didn't suppose we came here to play games, she said. Relaxation, the doctor said vaguely, and Theodora turned, with a sullen shrug, and stared again into the fire. I'll get the chessmen if you'll tell me where, Luke said, and the doctor smiled. Better let me go, he said. I've studied a floor plan of the house, remember? If we let you go off wandering by yourself, we'd very likely never find you again. As the door closed behind him, Luke gave Theodora a quick, curious glance, and then came over to stand by Eleanor. You're not nervous, are you? Did that story frighten you? Eleanor shook her head emphatically, and Luke said, You looked pale. I probably ought to be in bed, Eleanor said. I'm not used to driving as far as I did today. Brandy, Luke said. It will make you sleep better. You too, he said to the back of Theodora's head. Thank you, Theodora said coldly, not turning. I rarely have trouble sleeping. Luke grinned knowingly at Eleanor, and then turned as the doctor opened the door. My wild imagination, the doctor said, setting down the chess set. What a house this is. Did something happen? Eleanor asked. The doctor shook his head. We probably ought to agree now not to wander around the house alone, he said. What happened? Eleanor asked. My own imagination, the doctor said firmly. This table all right, Luke? It's a lovely old chess set, Luke said. I wonder how the younger sister happened to overlook it. I can tell. You one thing, the doctor said. If it was the younger sister sneaking around this house at night, she had nerves of iron. It watches, he added suddenly. The house. It watches every move you make. And then, my own imagination, of course. In the light of the fire, Theodora's face was stiff and sulky. She likes attention, Eleanor thought wisely, and without thinking, moved and sat on the floor beside Theodora. Behind her, she could hear the gentle sound of chessmen being set down on a board, and the comfortable small movements of Luke and the doctor taking each other's measure. And in the fire there were points of flame and little stirrings. She waited a minute for Theodora to speak and then said agreeably, "Still hard to believe you're really here?" "I had no idea it would be so dull," Theodora said. "We'll find plenty to do in the morning," Eleanor said. At home there would be people around and lots of talking and laughing and lights and excitement. "I suppose I don't need such things," Eleanor said, almost apologetically. "There never was much excitement for me. I had to stay with Mother, of course, and when she was asleep I kind of got used to playing solitaire or listening to the radio. I never could bear to read in the evenings because I had to read aloud to her for 2 hours every afternoon. Love stories." And she smiled a little, looking into the fire. But that's not all, she thought, astonished at herself. That doesn't tell what it was like, even if I wanted to tell. Why am I talking? I'm terrible, aren't I? Theodora moved quickly and put her hand over Eleanor's. I sit here and grouch because there's nothing to amuse me. I'm very selfish. Tell me how horrible I am. And in the firelight her eyes shone with delight. You're horrible, Eleanor said obediently. Theodora's hand on her own embarrassed her. She disliked being touched, and yet a small physical gesture seemed to be Theodora's chosen way of expressing contrition, or pleasure, or sympathy. I wonder if my fingernails are clean, Eleanor thought, and slid her hand away gently. I am horrible, Theodora said, good-humored again. I'm horrible and beastly and no one can stand me. There. Now tell me about yourself. I'm horrible and beastly and no one can stand me. Theodora laughed. Don't make fun of me. You're sweet and pleasant and everyone likes you very much. Luke has fallen madly in love with you and I am jealous. Now I want to know more about you. Did you really take care of your mother for many years? Yes, Eleanor said. Her fingernails were dirty, and her hand was badly shaped, and people made jokes about love because sometimes it was funny. 11 years, until she died 3 months ago. Were you sorry when she died? Should I say how sorry I am? No, she wasn't very happy. And neither were you. And neither was I. But what about now? What did you do afterward when you were free at last? I sold the house, Eleanor said. My sister and I each took whatever we wanted from it, small things. There was really nothing much except little things my mother had saved, my father's watch and some old jewelry. Not at all like the sisters of Hill House. And you sold everything else? Everything. Just as soon as I could. And then, of course, you started a gay, mad fling that brought you inevitably
to Hill House.
Not exactly, Eleanor laughed. But all those wasted years. Did you go on a cruise, look for exciting young men, buy new clothes? Unfortunately, Eleanor said dryly, there was not at all that much money. My sister put her share into the bank for her little girl's education. I did buy some clothes to come to Hill House. People like answering questions about themselves, she thought. What an odd pleasure it is. I would answer anything right now. What will you do when you go back? Do you have a job? No job right now. I don't know what I'm going to do. I know what I'll do. Theodora stretched luxuriously. I'll turn on every light in our apartment and just bask. What is your apartment like? Theodora shrugged. Nice, she said. We found an old place and fixed it up ourselves. One big room and a couple of small bedrooms, nice kitchen. We painted it red and white and made over a lot of old furniture we dug up in junk shops. One really nice table with a marble top. We both love doing over old things. Are you married? Eleanor asked. There was a little silence, and then Theodora laughed quickly and said, "No." "Sorry," Eleanor said, horribly embarrassed. "I didn't mean to be curious." "You're funny," Theodora said, and touched Eleanor's cheek with her finger. There are lines by my eyes, Eleanor thought, and turned her face away from the fire. "Tell me where you live," Theodora said. Eleanor thought, looking down at her hands, which were badly shaped. We could have afforded a laundress, she thought. It wasn't fair. My hands are awful. "I have a little place of my own," she said slowly. "An apartment like yours, only I live alone. Smaller than yours, I'm sure. I'm still furnishing it. Buying one thing at a time, you know, to make sure I get everything absolutely right. White curtains. I had to look for weeks before I found my little stone lions on each corner of the mantel, and I have a white cat, and my books and records and pictures. Everything has to be exactly the way I want it because there's only me to use it. Once I had a blue cup with stars painted on the inside. When you looked down into a cup of tea, it was full of stars. I want a cup like that. Maybe one will turn up someday in my shop," Theodora said. "Then I can send it to you. Someday you'll get a little package saying, 'To Eleanor, with love from her friend Theodora,' and it will be a blue cup full of stars. I would have stolen those gold-rimmed dishes," Eleanor said, laughing. "Mate," Luke said, and the doctor said, "Oh dear, oh dear." "Blind luck," Luke said cheerfully. "Have you ladies fallen asleep there by the fire?" "Just about," Theodora said. Luke came across the room and held out a hand to each of them to help them up, and Eleanor, moving awkwardly, almost fell. Theodora rose in a quick motion and stretched and yawned. "Theo is sleepy," she said. "I'll have to lead you upstairs," the doctor said. "Tomorrow we must really start to learn our way around. Luke, will you screen the fire?" "Had we better make sure that the doors are locked?" Luke asked. "I imagine that Mrs. Dudley locked the back door when she left, but what about the others?" "I hardly think we'll catch anyone breaking in," Theodora said. "Anyway, the little companion used to lock her doors, and what good did it do her? Suppose we want to break out?" Eleanor asked. The doctor glanced quickly at Eleanor and then away. "I see no need for locking doors," he said quietly. "There is certainly not much danger of burglars from the village," Luke said. "In any case," the doctor said, "I will not sleep for an hour or so yet. At my age, an hour's reading before bedtime is essential, and I wisely brought Pamela with me. If any of you has trouble sleeping, I will read aloud to you. I never yet knew anyone who could not fall asleep with Richardson being read aloud to him." Talking quietly, he led them down the narrow hallway and through the great front hall and to the stairs. "I have often planned to try it on very small children," he went on. Eleanor followed Theodora up the stairs. She had not realized until now how worn she was, and each step was an effort. She reminded herself naggingly that she was in Hill House, but even the blue room meant only right now the bed with the blue coverlet and the blue quilt. On the other hand, the doctor continued behind her. A Fielding novel, comparable, in length although hardly in subject matter, would never do for very young children. I even have doubts about Stern. Theodora went to the door of the green room and turned and smiled. "If you feel the least bit nervous," she said to Eleanor, "run right into my room." "I will," Eleanor said earnestly. "Thank you. Good night." "And certainly not Smollett. Ladies, Luke and I are here on the other side of the stairway." "What color are your rooms?" Eleanor asked, unable to resist. "Yellow," the doctor said, surprised. "Pink," Luke said with a dainty gesture of distaste. "We're blue and green down here," Theodora said. "I will be awake reading." the doctor said. "I will leave my door ajar, so I will certainly hear any sound. Good night. Sleep well." "Good night," Luke said. "Good night, all." As she closed the door of the blue room behind her, Eleanor thought wearily that it might be the darkness and oppression of Hill House that tired her so, and then it no longer mattered. The blue bed was unbelievably soft. Odd, she thought sleepily, that the house should be so dreadful, and yet in many respects so physically comfortable. The soft bed, the pleasant lawn, the good fire, the cooking of Mrs. Dudley. The company too, she thought, and then thought, now I can think about them. I am all alone. Why is Luke here? But why am I here? Journeys end in lovers' meeting. They all saw that I was afraid. She shivered and sat up in bed to reach for the quilt at the foot. Then, half amused and half cold, she slipped out of bed and went, barefoot and silent, across the room to turn the key in the lock of the door. They won't know I locked it, she thought, and went hastily back to bed. With the quilt pulled up around her, she found herself looking with quick apprehension at the window, shining palely in the darkness, and then at the door. I wish I had a sleeping pill to take, she thought, and looked again over her shoulder, compulsively, at the window, and then again at the door and thought, is it moving? But I locked it. Is it moving? I think, she decided concretely, that I would like this better if I had the blankets over my head. Hidden deep in the bed under the blankets, she giggled and was glad none of the others could hear her. In the city, she never slept with her head under the covers. I have come all this way today, she thought. Then she slept, secure. In the next room, Theodora slept, smiling, with her light on. Farther down the hall, the doctor, reading Pamela, lifted his head, occasionally to listen, and once went to his door and stood for a minute looking down the hall before going back to his book. A nightlight shone at the top of the stairs over the pool of blackness which was the hall. Luke slept, on his bedside table a flashlight, and the lucky piece he always carried with him. Around them the house brooded, settling and stirring with a movement that was almost like a shudder. 6 miles away, Mrs. Dudley awakened, looked at her clock, thought of Hill House, and shut her eyes quickly. Mrs. Gloria Sanderson, who owned Hill House and lived 300 miles away from it, closed her detective story, yawned, and reached up to turn off her light, wondering briefly if she had remembered to put the chain on the front door. Theodora's friend slept. So did the doctor's wife and Eleanor's sister. Far away in the trees over Hill House, an owl cried out, and, toward morning, a thin, fine rain began, misty and dull. Chapter 4. Eleanor awakened to find the blue room gray and colorless in the morning rain. She found that she had thrown the quilt off during the night and had finished sleeping in her usual manner, with her head on the pillow. It was a surprise to find that she had slept until after 8, and she thought that it was ironic that the first good night's sleep she had had in years had come to her in Hill House. Lying in the blue bed, looking up into the dim ceiling with its remote carved pattern, she asked herself, half asleep still, what did I do? Did I make a fool of myself? Were they laughing at me? Thinking quickly over the evening before, she could remember only that. She must have, seemed foolishly, childishly contented, almost happy. Had the others been amused to see that she was so simple? I said silly things, she told herself, and of course they noticed. Today I will be more reserved, less openly, grateful to all of them for having me. Then, awakening completely, she shook her head and sighed. You are a very silly baby, Eleanor, she told herself, as she did every morning. The room came clearly alive around her. She was in the blue room at Hill House. The dimity curtains were moving slightly at the window, and the wilds splashing in. The bathroom must be Theodora. Awake, sure to be dressed and ready first, certain to be hungry. "Good morning," Eleanor called, and Theodora answering, gasping. "Good morning through in a minute. I'll leave the tub filled for you. Are you starving?" "Because I am." Does she think I wouldn't bathe unless she left a full tub for me? Eleanor wondered, and then was ashamed. "I came here to stop thinking things like that," she told herself sternly, and rolled out of bed and went to the window. She looked out across the veranda roof to the wide lawn below, with its bushes and little clumps of trees wound around with mist. Far down at the end of the lawn was the line of trees which marked the path to the creek, although the prospect of a jolly picnic on the grass was not, this morning, so appealing. It was clearly going to be wet all day, but it was a summer rain, deepening the green of the grass and the trees, sweetening and cleaning the air. It's charming, Eleanor thought, surprised at herself. She wondered if she was the first person ever to find Hill House charming, and then thought, chilled. Or do they all think so, the first morning? She shivered and found herself at the same time unable to account for the excitement she felt, which made it difficult to remember why it was so odd to wake up happy in Hill House. "I'll starve to death." Theodora pounded on the bathroom door, and Eleanor snatched at her robe and hurried. "Try to look like a stray sunbeam," Theodora called out from her room. "It's such a dark day, we've got to be a little brighter than usual. Sing before breakfast, you'll cry." Before night, Eleanor told herself, because she had been singing softly. "In delay there lies no plenty." "I thought I was the lazy one," Theodora said complacently through the door. "But you were much, much worse. Lazy hardly begins to describe you. You must be clean enough now to come and have breakfast." Mrs. Dudley sets out breakfast at 9. What will she think when we show up bright and smiling? She will sob with disappointment. Did anyone scream for her in the night, do you suppose? Eleanor regarded a soapy leg critically. "I slept like a log," she said. "So did I. If you are not ready in 3 minutes, I will come in and drown you. I want my breakfast." Eleanor was thinking that it had been a very long time since she had dressed to look like a stray sunbeam, or been so hungry for breakfast, or arisen so aware, so conscious of herself, so deliberate and tender in her attentions. She even brushed her teeth with a niceness she could not remember ever feeling before. "It is all the result of a good night's sleep," she thought. "Since Mother died, I must have been sleeping even more poorly than I realized. Aren't you ready yet?" Coming," Eleanor said, and ran to the door, remembered that it was still locked and unlocked it softly. Theodora was waiting for her in the hall, vivid in the dullness in gaudy plaid. Looking at Theodora, it was not possible for Eleanor to believe that she ever dressed or washed or moved or ate or slept or talked without enjoying every minute of what she was doing. Perhaps Theodora never cared at all what other people thought of her. "Do you realize that we may be another hour or so just finding the dining room?" Theodora said. "But maybe they have left us a map. Did you know that Luke and the doctor have been up for hours? I was talking to them from the window." They have started without me, Eleanor thought. Tomorrow I will wake up earlier and be there to talk. From the window, too. They came to the foot of the stairs, and Theodora crossed the great dark hall and put her hand confidently to a door. "Here," she said, but the door opened into a dim, echoing room neither of them had seen before. "Here," Eleanor said, but the door she chose led onto the narrow passage to the little parlor where last night they had sat before a fire. "It's across the hall from that," Theodora said, and turned, baffled. "Damn it," she said, and put her head back and shouted, "Luke, doctor!" Distantly they heard an answering shout, and Theodora moved to open another door. "If they think," she said over her shoulder, "that they are going to keep me forever in this filthy hall, trying one door after another to get to my breakfast, That's the right one, I think, Eleanor said, with the dark room to go through and then the dining room beyond. Theodora shouted again, blundered against some light piece of furniture,